The warning came through every major channel known to the galaxy. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't polite. It was a voice that rumbled across systems, carried by encrypted pulses and forced open comms. It was a command, not a request. This is High Command of the Galactic Empire. Humanity is ordered to cease expansion beyond Sector 12 immediately. Violations will be considered acts of war. This is your only warning. It played on every screen, every wall, every station, from Earth to the farthest colonies on the edge of known space. Some alien species trembled when they heard it. Others sighed with relief, hoping the arrogant humans would finally be put in their place. But on the bridge of the Iron Rain, a massive battleship orbiting the mining colony of Varnus IV, the human crew just laughed. It wasn't forced. It wasn't nervous. It was that deep, honest kind of laugh, the kind that spreads across a room like wildfire. Captain Wren didn't even look up from his ration tray. "Tell him thanks for the heads up," he muttered, mouth half full of synthetic meat. "But the Empire can kiss the darkest part of a black hole." The room cracked up again. Even the AI managing external comms threw in a simulated chuckle. Commander Lin, seated to his right, raised an eyebrow. "They're serious this time. That was an Imperial threat broadcast, not some backwater pirate bluff." "Yeah," Wren replied, wiping his mouth with a sleeve. "And we're still the species that nuked itself into unity. We've bled too much to be scared of words." She looked down at the feed again. The Empire's symbol, that swirling mass of golden stars wrapped around a claw, was still floating on every screen, pulsing like it was alive. "Could be a trap," she said. "Of course it's a trap," Wren replied, "but we've got better bait." Down in the hangar, engineers were prepping the spine breakers, specialized strike ships that had shredded pirate fleets and outrun Dominion warbirds. Every human ship came with two things most alien vessels lacked: redundancy and rage. You could hit a human hull 10 times, and it'd still limp forward, teeth bared, guns hot. Because Earth didn't breed perfection, it bred persistence. The Empire had every reason to want humanity leashed. In just under a century, humans had colonized more systems than most species had in 500 years. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't ask to join councils. They simply landed, survived, and expanded. And when they were told no, they built faster. On Varnus IV, the ground trembled slightly, a sign of another deep-core drill lighting up beneath the colony's crust. That vibration had become a comfort to settlers. It meant progress. It meant they were extracting the materials that kept the fleet moving, that kept the Terran line punching forward into Imperial space like a knife through silk. When the second warning came, it wasn't a message. It was a blockade. 12 Empire-class dreadnoughts dropped into orbit around Varnus IV. No warning, no questions, no introductions. They were black as obsidian, silent, massive, and very clearly armed to the fangs. They parked themselves like judges above the colony. Their weapons rotated slowly, menacing, deliberate. One transmission came through, and only one. "Turn back, or be turned to dust." Wren stood at the bridge, staring at the fleet out the wide-paneled front window. His face was calm, unreadable. The crew waited. He tapped the glass lightly with one finger. "They brought 12? "Yes, sir." He gave a low whistle. "Should have brought more." Then, for the first time in 30 minutes, he gave the order they were all waiting for. "Arm everything, and make sure they hear us laugh when we start firing." The sound of klaxons was strangely comforting to the crew of the Iron Rain. Red emergency lights rotated above every bulkhead, casting long shadows across the steel-gray walls of the bridge. Men and women snapped into action without panic. There was no frantic rushing, no yelling, Just that quiet, sharp focus that came from having danced with death one too many times and learning its rhythm. Commander Lin tapped in coordinates on her tactical panel, her fingers a blur. All spinebreakers are prepped and waiting for deployment. I've instructed secondary units to target engine arrays only. We'll disable before we destroy, unless we're pushed. Captain Wren stood at the center of it all like a statue carved from war. He didn't pace. He didn't bark. He watched the enemy fleet with the patience of a wolf just waiting for the right jugular to show. "Put them on screen," he said. The view screen lit up with the outer orbit. The 12 Empire-class dreadnoughts hovered like predators circling a wounded animal. Only they hadn't realized the creature beneath them had teeth. Each Imperial dreadnought was over 2,000 meters long, elegant in design, sleek, angular, polished to a cold, unfeeling perfection. Their hulls shimmered with armor plating made of narcium alloy, a metal that was said to absorb all light around it, giving the illusion that the ships were just voids in space. But human ships? They weren't pretty. They weren't graceful. The Iron Rain looked like a metal sledgehammer someone had slapped thrusters onto. Its hull was dented in several places. Some old missile scars hadn't even been painted over. External shielding arrays were bolted on at uneven angles, like a last-minute repair job that had somehow lasted 20 years. And yet it still stood, as ugly and stubborn as the species that made it. "Empire's not opening fire yet," Lin muttered. "They're posturing," Wren said, "waiting for us to blink." "What if they're serious this time?" "They're always serious. That's their problem." Then came the final straw. A message popped up on secondary comms, a broadcast from the lead dreadnought, translated and decrypted in real time. "This is Admiral Zareth of the 7th Imperial Enforcer Wing. Varnus 4 is now under the direct protection of the Empire. Any further mining operations will be considered theft of Imperial resources. You have 15 minutes to evacuate. After that, we will begin orbital sterilization." Silence fell over the bridge. Sterilization meant what it always did: glass the colony, burn the planet's surface into unusable slag, wipe out the people, the machinery, the soil, the air, everything. Captain Wren blinked slowly. He just threatened 12,000 civilians. "He's counting on us backing down," Lin said, "or surrendering." Wren looked toward the comms officer. "Patch me in." "To them?" "Sir?" "To everyone." A small green light blinked alive on the officer's panel. "You're live across all frequencies." Wren stepped forward, cleared his throat, and spoke in a voice that felt more like gravel dragged across steel. "To Admiral Zareth, and whatever crusted council of cowards thought this was a smart idea, you've got this backward. We're not guests in this galaxy. We're survivors. We're fighters. We're the reason half the known sectors even have anti-pirate patrols. You think threats scare us? We invented war long before we had spaceflight. We nuked our own atmosphere and lived through it. We burned our own history and rewrote it in blood. And now you think waving your shiny ships in front of us is going to make us tuck tail? This isn't diplomacy. It's a warning back. You fire a single round at that colony, you hurt a single worker on that surface, and you'll learn what it means when the dogs you tried to leash decide to bite back. Iron Rain out." He didn't yell. He didn't scream. But something in his tone, the calm violence beneath every word, hit harder than any gunfire could. A quiet fell over the bridge once the feed ended. No applause, no cheers, just readiness. Down in the hangars, pilots began strapping in. In one of the spinebreaker strike ships, a pilot known only as Wren locked her helmet into place. Her co-pilot, a thin kid with a nervous twitch named Bannock, tapped on the control panel, checking weapons systems. "You think they'll really fire?" Bannock asked. Wren cracked her knuckles. "Hope so? You hope they do? Better to fight a war we're ready for than live under a leash." She wasn't being poetic. She had grown up in a slave camp on a border colony that had once belonged to the Empire, a gift to humanity after a diplomatic settlement years ago. Only it wasn't a gift. It was a sentence. The Empire didn't conquer planets by force most times. It preferred to threaten, coerce, blockade, and starve until the locals surrendered themselves. But Earth never learned to surrender. Back on the Iron Rain, Lynn narrowed her eyes as the enemy dreadnoughts began to shift formation. They're moving. Coordinated spread. Looks like they're trying to get a planetary targeting lock. Wren cracked his neck. Fine. Let's show them we're not just talk. He turned to the weapons officer. Fire a full salvo. Aim between their ships. Not at them, a warning shot. Aye, sir. Outside the Iron Rain, 10 missile bays opened like jagged mouths. A storm of high-yield torpedoes screamed into space, glowing red-hot as they tore across the black void. They didn't strike the dreadnoughts, but passed just between them, close enough to shake their hulls with shock waves. A clear message. We're armed, we're accurate, and we're not afraid of you. But that was the last chance. The Empire didn't respond with words this time. A blue flash lit up across the dreadnought fleet. Energy lances fired, not at the Iron Rain, but at Varnus IV, at the colony. Wren's eyes widened as he saw the flashes descend. No. Too late. 4 orbital beams crashed into the colony's outer mining facilities. Fire blossomed from the surface like hell opening up. Dust clouds rose in seconds, covering the view. No communication came from the colony. The blast radius was enormous. Lynn's voice cracked. Thousands down there. They didn't even wait 15 minutes. Wren's voice was low now, deadly quiet. Target lock all enemy ships. No more warnings. The bridge transformed into a storm of movement. Human ships surged forward. Not just the Iron Rain, but the rest of the Terran task fleet stationed nearby. 5 destroyers, 2 heavy cruisers, and a carrier offloading spine breakers like angry hornets. The first wave of human missiles wasn't about finesse. It was fury, spite, a message in the shape of explosions. 2 Empire dreadnoughts tried to reposition, but they were slow, too large to dodge in time. Human warships fired relentlessly, finding gaps in their shielding, exploiting exposed coolant ports and drive exhausts. Human engineers had studied Empire ships for years. Every inch of their pride was now a target. A spine-breaker squadron slammed through the gaps in formation, unleashing pulse cannons at close range. One dreadnought's right wing exploded. Another's bridge was torn open by a torpedo fired straight through its command tower. Empire ships began to retreat, but humanity wasn't finished, not even close. From the burning surface of Varnus IV, one broken mining facility still had a functional signal. A wounded engineer crawled to a console, blood in her mouth, and opened a channel. Through the smoke, with shaking fingers, she whispered, "They didn't flinch. They just attacked. We didn't even resist!" The transmission reached Iron Rain's bridge just as another Empire dreadnought cracked apart in orbit. Captain Wren clenched his jaw. He didn't feel victory. He felt something heavier, colder. "We're not here to win battles anymore," he said quietly. "We're here to make damn sure they never forget what happens when you touch Earth's people." Lynn nodded, her eyes cold. "We just made history," she said. "No," Wren replied. "We just started a war." The wreckage of 2 Empire-class dreadnoughts drifted across Varnus IV's orbit like shattered bones. Chunks of blackened hull rotated silently through the void, slowly spinning, lifeless, broken. A severed engine core burned quietly, flickering like a dying star. The smell of vaporized metal and ion discharge still lingered in the air. Even inside the sealed walls of the Iron Rain, no one was celebrating. Victory should have felt like something. Relief, pride, vengeance, maybe. But it didn't. Not here. Not now. On the bridge, Captain Wren sat motionless in his command chair. He hadn't spoken since the last dreadnought detonated. His face was carved in stone, his eyes locked on the view screen where smoke still rose from the ruined colony below. 12,000 dead. Maybe more. Civilians, workers, engineers, children, not soldiers, just people trying to build a better future on a dead rock, and the Empire burned them for it, then expected the rest of humanity to kneel. Commander Lin stood near the tactical console, running cleanup operations with precision. Drones were scouring the debris field for survivors. Rescue ships had already dropped into Varnus's upper atmosphere. The colony was broken but not buried. Not yet. "They hit the power grid," she muttered. "No heat, no medical. Everyone left down there is breathing toxic dust and freezing in the dark." "They won't be for long," Wren said flatly. "Deploy heat domes. Use the fallback reserves. Send all we've got." "They'll see it as weakness," she said. "Let them." There was silence between them. Then a ping, a priority alert from High Command. Wren blinked once and looked toward comms. "Patch it through." The screen lit up with a man in a crisp navy blue uniform, sitting stiffly behind a desk made of polished steel. No medals, no insignia, just that cold stare reserved for people who made a mess the politicians now had to clean up. "Captain Wren," the man said. "Director Harrow," Wren answered without emotion. "What the hell have you done?" Wren didn't flinch. "I followed protocol. We were threatened. Civilians were attacked. I defended human lives." "You fired on the Empire. They sterilized a civilian colony. And you destroyed half of their 7th Fleet. They earned it." Director Harrow leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You think this is over? You think the Empire's going to let this go?" "No," Wren said. "I think they're going to double down, which is why we should hit them before they do." "Captain, they need to understand what it means to pick a fight with Earth. No more warnings, no more negotiations. We tried diplomacy. They answered with orbital fire. This ends one way. We bury them before they bury us." Harrow stared at him for a long moment. Then, to Wren's surprise, the director sighed. Not out of disagreement, but out of understanding. "You're not wrong," Harrow muttered. "But this isn't going to be some clean little war. The Empire's mobilizing across 4 sectors. Half the trade councils are already folding under pressure. They'll cut ties with us. Sanctions, blockades, blacklists. We're going to lose everything we've built." Wren stood. "Then we build something new." The director looked up. "We build it on their ruins." Across the galaxy, the ripple effect began. At the diplomatic outpost on Kireth 7, envoys from over 40 species gathered for what was supposed to be a standard peace summit. Instead, it turned into a war council. A representative from the Imperial Circle stood at the head of the long chamber, draped in traditional black robes, eyes burning with quiet rage. "The Terrans have crossed a line!" she hissed. "They've destroyed Imperial vessels, murdered thousands of loyal officers. This cannot stand." A Yulzan diplomat, tall, insectoid, and strangely amused, clicked his mandibles. "They didn't start it. Your fleet glassed a civilian colony. What did you think they would do?" "They were warned." "They laughed." The room grew tense. An elderly Delcari ambassador floated forward in a hover chair. His voice was slow, ancient. "Humanity is not like us. We all know this. They don't fear death the way we do. They don't negotiate the way we do. You threaten them, and they sharpen knives." The Imperial delegate slammed a clawed hand against the table. "Then we should cut out their tongue before they bite deeper." No one replied. Because they all knew, Biting deeper was exactly what the humans were about to do. 3 days later, the Stormfront, another Terran battleship, dropped out of warp above the Empire's border world, Heliox Prime. No warnings, no demands. The planet was a fueling station and shipyard for the Imperial Navy. Thousands of technicians lived on its surface. Dozens of ships were in dry dock, undergoing refits. It was a strategic point, and humans knew it. The Stormfront launched 30 surface-piercing warheads within minutes of arrival. They struck with surgical precision. The fuel reservoirs went first. Massive mushroom clouds bloomed like metal flowers. Then the hangars, then the command towers. By the time Empire reinforcements arrived, the Stormfront was already gone. The Empire called it a terror attack. Humanity called it justice. Across human space, volunteers began flooding recruitment stations. People didn't need propaganda. They had hollow footage of children buried under rubble on Varnus 4. They had voices crying out in the dark. And most of all, they had rage. Shipyards began running 24 hours a day. New ships were being welded together by hand still raw from mining. No one cared. They didn't want luxury. They wanted revenge. Back on the Iron Rain, the mood had shifted. The crew wasn't just defending anymore. They were hunting. Commander Lin stood at the strategy table, red markers blinking across a sector map. We've confirmed multiple Empire supply lines between Kevlon and Oros, lightly guarded, mostly automated, easy pickings. Ren nodded. Send the fleet. She hesitated. These aren't combat ships. They're transports. I don't care. Hit them. Leave one alive. Let them limp back home and tell their admirals what happens when you back Earth into a corner. And if we escalate too far? We're already past that line, Commander. We're in a new war now. The kind with no rules. He looked her dead in the eyes. The kind we were born for. 2 weeks into the conflict, the Empire tried something new. Propaganda. They broadcast across neutral sectors, painting humans as violent savages. Monsters. Uncivilized brutes with no respect for galactic law. Footage was doctored. Battles were re-edited. The story was flipped. But no one bought it. Because the truth was leaking. In survivor reports, in drone footage, in real-time data. Other species started speaking out. The colony on Varnus hadn't been a threat. It had been defenseless. And the Empire fired first. Suddenly, neutrality started cracking. A few fringe species began offering humanity quiet support, repair stations, raw materials, even intel. Not because they loved humans, but because they hated the Empire more. And humans? They didn't ask for help, but they accepted it, with a nod, a handshake, and a quiet promise. We won't forget. But the Empire wasn't done yet. In a secret meeting on their core world of Taraxis, High Command planned their next move, a message, not just a retaliation, a statement of dominance. They would target Earth itself. No full invasion, just a surgical strike, one city, one crater, to remind humanity who ruled the stars. But what they didn't know was this. Earth wasn't unguarded. And the ones who defended it? They were already waiting. Teeth bared, fingers on triggers, ready to teach the galaxy's oldest empire one brutal truth. You don't poke the species that laughs at warnings. The sky above Earth had never looked clearer. The orbital defense grid, once a relic from the early days of expansion, now bristled with renewed life. Satellites weren't just for weather anymore. They were war machines wrapped in innocent shells. Dozens of sleek, white-armored ships rotated slowly above the planet, maintaining patrol routes that traced the curve of the Earth like sentinels guarding a cradle. From the ground, civilians couldn't see the tension in orbit. The kids in Chicago still ran through artificial snowfields. The cafes in Nairobi buzzed with conversation about new colony opportunities. Even in the smog-smeared alleys of the undercities in eastern Eurasia, people laughed, drank, and cursed the government like any other day. But in low orbit, humanity was holding its breath, because the Empire was coming. The intel hadn't been easy to get. It came from a smuggler intercepted on the edge of Kepler's rift, a scared, half-starved, lizard-like creature who cracked under pressure and spilled everything. The Empire had dispatched a hit squad, 4 stealth-class raiders equipped with cloaking fields, planet-breaking payloads, and no intention of surviving the mission. Their target was simple: destroy a Terran city and warp out before retaliation could be coordinated. Any city would do. The message was more important than the damage. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They underestimated how seriously Earth took revenge. High above the Atlantic, on the orbital platform Vigil 1, General Thorne reviewed the latest sensor data with a face made of granite. He had deep lines etched into his cheeks from years of war. Not from alien battles, but from surviving the wars on Earth itself. The water riots, the collapse, the Unity War. He was from a time when humans killed each other with more creativity than any alien ever had. And that made him dangerous. "They'll drop in from behind the lunar shadow," said Commander Alara beside him. "Stealth protocols only work if they break line of sight before entry. Once they're in the gravity well, they'll glide silent." Thorne nodded, eyes locked on the tactical screen. "Cloaked or not, mass can't hide from gravity. Prep grav sinks. Ready Omega protocol." Alara blinked. "You're authorizing Omega?" "Those bastards burned Varnus 4, Thorne said flatly. "Let's give them a sunrise they won't forget." Across the Pacific Rim, defense stations buzzed. Deep-sea anti-orbital silos powered up. The old Titan-class laser cannons on Mount Fuji hummed for the first time in 2 decades. From Antarctica to Siberia, orbital defense beams rotated into position like sleeping gods rising. They weren't built to fight pirates or handle asteroid threats. They were built to fight gods. And today, they would be tested. The first Empire ship dropped out of its cloak 6 kilometers above the Indian Ocean. Sleek, silent, and deadly, it opened its bomb bay and prepared to release a pulse detonation payload designed to vaporize anything within a 500-kilometer radius. It never got the chance. The Hades railgun, buried deep beneath the Himalayan shelf, activated. It fired once. A hypervelocity slug, the size of a train car, launched upward at Mach 17. The Empire ship didn't detect it until impact. The blast tore through the raider like paper. No explosion, just absence. One moment the ship existed. The next, there was a spinning cloud of molten metal raining into the sea. 3 more cloaked ships appeared across Earth's orbit, engaging evasive maneuvers, thinking the first strike was luck. It wasn't. From the dark side of Earth, dozens of anti-stealth turrets flared to life. They weren't aiming at signals. They were aiming at disturbances, gravitational shifts, micro-vibrations in the upper atmosphere, anything that suggested presence. And humans were very, very good at hunting ghosts. The second ship tried to fire its payload toward Sydney. 2 interceptor drones slammed into its hull just as the bomb dropped. The explosion ignited in high orbit, far from the city, but bright enough to cast a false dawn over the continent. The third raider banked hard, attempting to escape Earth's pull. A defense satellite named Gravedigger released its payload, 4 homing plasma torpedoes guided by magneto-distortion fields. They pierced the ship's shields and gutted its core. The raider spun out of control and broke apart in a cascade of glowing debris. The 4th ship, realizing the trap had closed, tried to warp out. But Earth's new defense grid wasn't just made to protect, it was made to punish. The FANG protocol activated. A dormant device in orbit, officially listed as a solar reflector, detached a panel, revealing an experimental gravity well generator. It surged to life, anchoring itself to the escaping raider's warp drive like a leash made of physics itself. The The ship screeched to a halt mid-warp and imploded. It was over in less than 5 minutes. 4 state-of-the-art Empire strike ships gone. No survivors, no transmission, no evidence beyond the wreckage slowly falling into Earth's atmosphere. But Earth wasn't done. General Thorne stepped forward and opened a fleet-wide broadcast. "To all Empire assets monitoring this system," he said, voice cold and unflinching. "We've received your message. You wanted to show us fear. Instead, you showed us where to aim next." He paused. "You lit the fuse. Now burn with the rest of them." Hours later, in a quiet chamber deep inside Earth's Strategic War Council, new orders were signed. Operation Iron Howl, a full-scale retaliatory strike, not just military. Psychological, cultural, aimed at showing the Empire that Earth had no leash anymore, that humanity's patience had snapped. The first target wasn't a military base, it was a monument. On the Empire's capital world of Taraxis, a massive, ancient spire stood in the heart of the Imperial Plaza, a towering obelisk that marked their rise to dominance over the stars. It was considered untouchable, sacred, guarded by more than 300 automated defense systems. But it wasn't untouchable anymore. 1 week later, at 03 Do Hour Standard Galactic Time, the Reckoner, a human stealth ship barely the size of a shuttle, slipped into Taraxis' atmosphere disguised as a merchant satellite. Its outer shell was made of adaptive camouflage polymers, stolen tech pieced together in a shipyard orbiting Saturn. Inside, the pilot, an orphan from the Varnus IV colony named Rhea, waited for one lock. Just one. When the spire aligned perfectly between 2 geostationary satellites, she launched a payload of 3 micro-nukes, each smaller than a soda can. She didn't wait for impact. She didn't need to. Every citizen on Taraxis saw it. The spire erupting in a blinding blue fireball, the shockwave leveling the surrounding plaza, the fires burning for hours. No one died. Not physically. But something more sacred had been killed that day. Pride. The Empire had never been touched on its home soil. Until now. Back on Earth, in a quiet observation deck on the Iron Rain, Captain Wren watched the footage of the spire burning. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just whispered to himself, "Now they know." Commander Lin entered quietly, holding a fresh report. "Empire's begun mass recruitment. They're moving fleets from the inner systems. Looks like they're preparing for a long war." Wren nodded. "So are we. We've got support pouring in from the fringe sectors. Even some of the neutral zones are turning a blind eye when we pass through." "They're scared," he said. "Of us?" "No," he replied. "Of what happens when we win." She paused, then looked out at the stars. "And if we lose?" He met her gaze. "Then we make sure they'll never forget who we were." The news of the obliterated spire on Taraxis shattered the illusion of Imperial invincibility. Across every Imperial-controlled system, panic rippled like shockwaves from a dying star. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had ruled with unquestioned power. They didn't just conquer, they conditioned. They rewrote history to paint themselves as benevolent rulers, custodians of order, and protectors of peace. That towering spire had been their crown jewel, a monument that rose from the very spot where the founding empress supposedly signed the first galactic peace accord. Now it was a crater, and the people who did it weren't hiding. They were laughing. Inside the Imperial War Council chamber, a black domed hall that floated above Taraxis' new subterranean bunker system, the mood was raw. Gone was the polished diplomacy and rehearsed arrogance. Now the ruling class looked shaken, exposed. Admiral Vex, a being whose skin shimmered like polished glass, slammed a data core onto the table, sending its contents flickering into a hovering hologram of red. 37 supply routes have been hit in the last 2 weeks, he growled. Not military installations, supply lines, food, medicine, fuel. This is targeted psychological warfare. And it's working, said High Strategist Ulyss, her voice thin, brittle. We've had 3 uprisings in outer colonies. Civilians are beginning to believe humanity can win. Emperor Kathos, seated atop a floating obsidian throne, remained silent. His golden mask gave no expression, but his fingers clenched the throne's armrest tightly. Have we retaliated properly? He asked, voice distorted through a voice synth modulator. We've tried, Vex answered, but they're mobile, unpredictable. They don't hold ground. They hit and vanish. Their colonies keep moving. Even their military command is fragmented. Every captain operates independently. They're chaotic, Ulyss added. They're dangerous, Vex finished. Kathos stood slowly. His robes flowed like liquid shadows. Then we must speak their language. The room fell silent. And in that silence, the Emperor authorized something not used in over 300 years. Protocol Silencer. A scorched earth mandate. Kill every planet they touch. Burn every settlement. No prisoners. No diplomacy. No rules. Back in human space, the first whispers of the protocol reached the Terran Alliance through a cracked feed smuggled from a terrified informant in the Visari system. Captain Wren reviewed it aboard the Iron Rain, the hologram of the Emperor's speech flickering with static. The words were cold, measured, not angry, far worse than that. Humanity has mistaken mercy for weakness. Let them feel what true silence sounds like. Wren shut off the feed. His jaw flexed. The bridge was quiet. Commander Lean broke the silence. They're going to start wiping worlds. They already have. Where? Falstead Prime. Lin's breath caught. That had been one of Earth's oldest colonies, a research station, a trade hub, a symbol of Terran cooperation. It had housed 10,000 scientists and 3,000 families. There was no military there, no warships, just smoke and ash now. Wren stepped towards the strategy board, tapping a red dot near the burned-out coordinates. This isn't about territory anymore, it's extermination. So what do we do? Lin asked. We adapt, like always. And humanity did adapt. They always had. First, they abandoned their old bases, breaking colonies into modular stations that could warp independently. Then, they began training civilian freighter crews to fight, retrofitting cargo ships into decoy warhammers. The old Terran phrase, "every ship a weapon," became gospel, but more than strategy, something else changed. The morality shifted. Earth had once prided itself on restraint, on being better than its past, avoiding the atrocities of old Earth wars. Now, every officer, every pilot, every soldier started to embrace what humanity had always tried to bury. Ruthlessness. They stopped aiming for military targets alone. Instead, they hit the Empire's softest points: power grids, water processing stations, cultural archives, data centers, even Empire breeding chambers where new clone batches were raised. They didn't just want the Empire to suffer. They wanted it to remember. The Ghost Knife, a stealth corvette operated by 6 ex-miners from Proxima, became famous after slicing through Empire territory and destroying an entire orbital academy mid-ceremony. The Salvage Queen, once a garbage freighter, became a terror legend after it faked a distress signal, lured in an Imperial cruiser, and detonated 2 internal antimatter cores, sacrificing its own crew to take out 1,200 enemies. And then there was the Wrathborn Fleet, Earth's unofficial Black Flag division, made up of war criminals, mercenaries, outcasts, and former death row inmates. The Wrathborn operated with one rule: make them bleed. They answered to no one, not even Terran High Command, and every time they struck, they left one thing behind: a floating message drone broadcasting on all frequencies. You warned us, we laughed, now scream. Back on Earth, the population changed too. Recruitment centers stopped accepting all volunteers, not because of lack of need, but because too many were showing up. People were abandoning careers, lives, relationships, trading comfort for war. Entire cities were converted into weapons manufacturing hubs. Children practiced evacuation drills weekly. Even old veterans in their 60s and 70s rejoined active combat, forming units with names like Hell's Grandpas and the Rusted Wrath. They didn't move as fast, but they never missed. General Thorne watched this new generation grow like wildfire. "We didn't just wake up," he muttered in a private command call. "We evolved." "And the galaxy's starting to notice," replied Alara. Indeed, they were. In the neutral zones, cracks in old alliances started to form. The Zethari, an aquatic species long loyal to the Empire, quietly began selling fuel to Terran ships under coded names. The Quarren Confederacy offered asylum to human civilians in exchange for military tech. Even the Cathari, an isolationist race with no military history, allowed humans to use their warp gates despite the Empire's protests. The Council of Galactic Harmony called for peace. But peace was dead, and in the silence, humanity howled. The breaking point came on the farming moon of Osha 3. It was a quiet little place. Orchards, aquifers, generations of peaceful coexistence. No weapons, no conflict. Until the Empire sent a message. They dropped a single warhead, not high yield, but viral. Within hours, everyone was coughing. Within a day, they were dying. By the end of the week, the moon was a corpse. Fields still ripe with fruit, now rotting beside the bodies of children and farmers. No military target, no strategic value, just a reminder. The Empire doesn't forget. 3 days later, Earth responded. The Terran assault carrier Vulture's Wake warped above the planet Regari V, a major Imperial food supplier with orbital farms stretching across its skies like rings. The captain of the Vulture's Wake gave a public broadcast first. "You poisoned children. We're not here to fight. We're here to erase." Then the missiles rained down, not at civilians, but at every crop generator, every water processor, every seed vault. Orbital farms shattered and rained fire. Dust blotted out the sky. Regari V survived, but it would starve for a generation. The message was clear. This isn't war, it's memory. And humanity was making sure the Empire remembered every scream, every loss, every crater they had caused. On the Iron Rain, Captain Wren received a message from the Terran High Command. It was short. "You're cleared for Levi Protocol." Lynn read it over his shoulder. Her face tensed. "Are they serious?" she asked. "They are. We'll lose good people." "We already have." Wren turned to his crew. "Prep for full sector blackout. Strip comms, burn IDs. We're ghosts now." Lynn nodded. "Target?" He looked at the map and tapped the Empire's breeding world, where they made soldiers, where they made children to turn into weapons, where their future was born. "We're going to strangle their legacy in the womb." The stars were quiet over the planet Virelis, but no one on the surface was sleeping. It was a lush world, almost beautiful. Rolling blue fields of synthetic grass spread across the equator, broken only by towering spires of white and silver, imperial birth complexes. They stretched for kilometers, housing the Empire's artificially bred soldiers, warriors grown in nutrient vats, educated by AI, trained from infancy to obey. The Empire called them the Purity Line. Humanity called them children with guns. And now those children were going to die. The Iron Rain hung in low orbit, dark as a tomb, its systems running cold to avoid early detection. No engine flares, no comms, no pings, just silence. like a wolf crouched in tall grass. Captain Wren stood at the viewport, watching the planet spin. He didn't speak for a long time. Commander Lin approached carefully. "We've confirmed the planetary shield drops in 40 minutes. Shift change." He nodded. "Once it's down," she added, "it won't go back up for another 90 seconds. That's our window." Wren said nothing. Lin stared at him. "You don't have to do this yourself, you know." He finally looked at her. "Yes, I do." The strike team deployed in silence. 12 operatives, veterans from fallen colonies, survivors of Empire prisons. Not one of them had seen peace in years. They wore matte black drop armor, shaped for atmospheric stealth, and carried pulse rifles with no serial numbers. Every face was cold. Eyes forward, hearts locked behind rage. At the center of the shuttle, Captain Wren sat with a photo wedged into his chest rig. A wrinkled image of a woman and a child, Varnus 4, before the fire, before the Empire made it dust. The pilot's voice crackled softly in the cabin. "Approaching breach point. Shields dropping. Now." The drop doors opened. They jumped. 12 shadows falling through the blackness of space, slashing into the atmosphere like comets. As they pierced the cloud layer, Varellis opened up below them, spires of white rising from the earth like jagged bones, the sterile heart of an empire that manufactured murder. Wren activated his comm. "We hit Spire 1. Burn the growth chambers. Kill the AI. If you see a fully grown unit, engage. If it's still in the tank, break the tank. No witnesses, no mercy." No one questioned the order. They had all seen the vids from OSHA 3. They had all buried children in glass. They landed on the outer platform with barely a sound. The Empire hadn't expected a direct assault, especially not here. Varellis was considered sacred ground, strategically vital, but symbolically untouchable. No species had dared strike it in the Empire's entire reign. Until now. Wren's team moved like ghosts. 2 guards were taken down with silenced blades. No screams, no alarms. A third was strangled before he could reach his communicator. They reached the first chamber in under 5 minutes. What they saw inside made one of the soldiers gag. Rows upon rows of translucent tanks stretched into the dark, each filled with blue gel and a suspended form inside. Infants, toddlers, teenagers, grown men and women, all at different stages of accelerated growth, suspended like insects in amber. A woman named Tari, once a medic on Falstead Prime, whispered, "They're not even born yet, and they're already being programmed." Embedded into the skulls of every fetus was a chip, blinking softly, feeding simulations into undeveloped brains. War, obedience, submission. Wren raised his rifle and aimed at the nearest tank. "Light it up." Gunfire echoed through the chamber like thunder. The tanks shattered one by one, liquid spilling across the floor in puddles of red and blue and gray. Some of the forms inside twitched before going still. Others never moved at all. One operative tossed a plasma grenade into the main power core. Another lobbed thermite charges at the nutrient pumps. And in less than 8 minutes, the first spire was burning. No alarms, just fire. But by the time they reached Spire 2, the element of surprise was gone. Turrets unfolded from the walls, drones dropped from ceiling panels. The halls became a maze of fire and metal, and the soldiers of Earth met it with teeth bared. Tari was shot through the chest while shielding a fellow soldier. She bled out beside a broken vat of half-grown limbs, whispering her son's name. Wren took a blast to the shoulder but kept moving. His gun was nearly empty, his sidearm jammed. He picked up an enemy's weapon and used it like a club. They cleared the second spire with only 4 survivors. No one spoke, no one cried. They just planted charges and watched it all burn. Above the planet, on the Iron Rain, Commander Lin paced across the bridge. "Extraction ship en route," the comms officer reported. "ETA 6 minutes. Send 2 backup teams. Prep the medical bay." She looked at the planet on the screen, fire blooming from its surface, like red veins spidering through a marble statue. Then a second ping. Multiple warp signatures. Imperial reinforcements. Big ones. "Get them out," she said. "Now." On the surface, Ren limped through the ruins of Spire 3, dragging a wounded soldier named Thalen. "Keep your eyes open," Ren hissed. "I'm fine," Thalen muttered, blood leaking from his thigh. "It's just a scratch." "You're lying." "I'm good at it." They reached the extraction point, a burned-out landing pad surrounded by ash and twisted metal. The shuttle appeared a moment later, engines roaring, side doors swinging open. Ren loaded Tholen in, then turned to look at the burning spires. He remembered the footage from OSHA 3, the children coughing, crying, choking. And for a moment, he didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow. Had they done the right thing? Or had they just become what they hated? The shuttle took off. Behind them, the planet burned. Back aboard the Iron Rain, the survivors were treated in silence. No cheering, no celebration. Just bandages, blood, and silence. Lin sat beside Ren in the medbay, wrapping his arm. "You took a piece of them tonight," she said softly. "No," Ren replied. "We took a piece of ourselves." She met his eyes. "You regret it?" "No," he said. "That's the worst part." Across the galaxy, the Empire didn't broadcast Virelli's. They tried to hide it. But the truth leaked. Drones recorded the fires. Smugglers whispered of human ghosts. Independent journalists posted images of shattered birthing vats and burned gene tanks. The Empire called it terrorism. The galaxy called it a reckoning. And suddenly, something shifted. Not in favor. Not in fear. But in recognition. Humanity wasn't some barbaric race crawling out of its gravity well anymore. It was a force, a reckoning, a virus with a memory and a grudge, and no brakes. And the galaxy began to whisper a new phrase. If Earth laughs at warnings, what happens when it starts screaming? The footage from Virelli's didn't just spread, it metastasized. It was supposed to be a secret mission. Quiet in, quiet out. Erase the Empire's breeding ground and leave nothing behind but ashes and ghosts. But the universe had eyes. Always did. A scavenger drone from the Trade Syndicate picked up a live signal as the final spire collapsed, relayed it to an outlaw news stream, and within days, the footage had been seen on nearly every data terminal in the galaxy. The Empire was quick to respond. They plastered headlines across their controlled networks. Terran terrorists target innocent life. Unborn children slaughtered by human extremists. Earth admits to genocide. But even as they screamed outrage, something far worse happened. Their own people started to believe it. On the outlying worlds of the Empire, small cracks began to form. There were murmurs of discontent, protests on planets where loyalty had never been questioned. Elite Imperial officers started to desert. Propaganda centers were burned down by their own citizens. Because the truth was unavoidable now. The Empire had created monsters, but humanity had become a mirror. And in that mirror, no one liked what they saw. On the bridge of the Iron Rain, Captain Ren stood before a holographic map, showing the galaxy's current front lines. They weren't lines anymore. They were fractures. Hundreds of small fires across hundreds of systems. No central battlefield. No rules, just chaos. Commander Lin stared at the map with hollow eyes. The collapse has started. They're turning on themselves. Good, Ren muttered. Not all of them. Just the outer systems. It starts small. Maybe. But the core worlds will hold. Their loyalty runs too deep. They've been taught to worship the Empire since birth. We'll teach them fear instead. She paused. You think we're winning? I think we've finally made them bleed. That's not the same thing. Meanwhile, in the dead space between sectors, the Empire prepared its answer. They called it Project Oblivion. Hidden in the blackest corner of Imperial space, the facility was built into the corpse of an ancient star. No light, no warmth, just steel and silence. There were no windows, no broadcasts, no soul, just one project. A biological weapon, not a bomb, not a virus, but a being. Something the Empire had started developing the moment Earth entered the galactic stage. A contingency for the unpredictable. A monster shaped not by nature, but by spite. It was not born. It was assembled. Gene stripped from the DNA of over a dozen war-torn species, modified with human hormonal responses and an artificially enhanced pain threshold. It could survive atmospheric entry without a ship. It could mimic human speech. It could live off radiation. And worst of all, it thought. It wasn't sentient. It was worse than that. It was obedient. They called it EVOS 9, and its first target was Earth. The Terran High Command didn't see it coming. No warp signature, no broadcast, just a spike in orbital sensors as a meteor-like object slammed into Earth's upper atmosphere. It landed in northern Greenland, a region chosen not for population, but for isolation. The Empire wanted the experiment to roam, to learn, to test itself. By the time Earth's defense grid noticed the impact, 3 satellite outposts were already offline. The security feeds were wrong. Nothing clear. Just flickers of movement, glimpses of distorted reflections, bodies torn apart, not with rage, but with precision, like something studying. And then the silence spread. Captain Wren was called back to Earth immediately. He stood with General Thorne in a secure war bunker beneath the Atlantic, reviewing the fragmented footage. It wasn't just violence. It was methodical, cold. "This isn't an invasion," Thorne muttered. "It's a message." "They wanted to show us what happens when we laugh at their warnings," Wren said. "No, this is worse. They want to make us afraid of our own home." A task force was deployed. 10 elite recon units, each armed with the best anti-personnel gear humanity had ever built. None returned. Only one transmission made it out. An audio file, 4 seconds long. Just one line. "It looks like us." Panic spread slowly. The public was never told what landed, only that a rogue Imperial bioweapon had breached Earth's security, that the Terran Alliance was handling it, that there was no need for alarm. But rumors spread. Civilian scouts in northern cities started disappearing. A research team in Canada went dark. A survivor from a trade convoy reported seeing a man-shaped thing climbing out of the Arctic Sea with skin that reflected stars. And inside the War Council, the panic was real. "It's moving south," Lynn reported via hololink from the Iron Rain, now in low Earth orbit. Satellite triangulation shows a heat signature nearing inhabited territory. "How long?" Wren asked. 2 days. "Send the rain down. Full weapon capacity." "It won't matter," she said. "That thing isn't just built to kill. It's built to infiltrate." He clenched his jaw. "It's not a weapon," he growled. "It's a mirror. They built a version of us." Earth prepared to go dark. Cities initiated blackout drills not seen since the early days of off-world colonization. All non-essential travel was banned. The northern sectors were completely evacuated. Volunteers were issued neural dampening implants to avoid psychic detection. A precaution borrowed from wars Earth hadn't fought in over a century. And in a hidden base beneath the ruins of old Moscow, Wren gathered a final strike team, 10 soldiers, No uniforms, no ranks, no orders, just one mission: kill the thing the Empire sent, or die trying. They tracked it to an abandoned hydro station near the old Arctic Circle. The moment they entered, they knew something was wrong. No power, no bodies, but blood everywhere. It wasn't random. It was arranged, lines drawn across walls, symbols that flickered with heat when scanned, words in Terran English. Ren read them aloud, his voice low. "You should have stayed in the dirt." The lights flickered. And then it spoke, not over speakers, not through tech, inside their minds. A voice that sounded just human enough to feel wrong. "You burned our children, so I will become yours." The room exploded into chaos. Gunfire, screams, shadows. It moved too fast to track. One soldier went down with a hole in his chest. Another lost half her face to a whip of bone. Ren fired his weapon blind, hitting nothing but walls. His men were cut down in seconds. He was the last. The thing finally stepped into the light. It looked like a man. Too perfect. Skin smooth, unscarred. But the eyes held nothing. No soul. No pain. Just purpose. "You made war beautiful," it whispered in a voice like his own. "Now I make peace ugly." Ren raised his weapon. "You're not peace. You're the whimper before extinction." He fired. The round struck the thing in the throat, bursting black ichor. It didn't fall, but it paused. And that was enough. Ren pulled the emergency beacon from his belt, jabbed it into the wall, and shouted into his comm, "Now!" From low orbit, the Iron Rain fired a kinetic orbital lance. A clean strike, 15 megatons of force, no radiation, no fallout, just obliteration. The hydrostation vanished in a crater of dust and fire, and the thing with it. Back in orbit, Ren's signal returned, weak but alive. Lin exhaled slowly. "We got him." "Did we get it?" "I don't know," she said. "I don't either." He looked out at the planet, his planet, once again bleeding. "Next time," he whispered, "we go to them." Because if the Empire thought that was humanity's last scream, they hadn't heard the roar. The decision was made in silence. There was no fanfare, no grand council, no parade of admirals debating strategy. The war had moved past speeches and medals. What was left now was instinct, rage, survival. The final offensive had one name: Operation Sundown, a coordinated, galaxy-spanning strike on the Empire's heart, the core systems, including the Imperial throne world Taraxis, the soul of their rule, their crown, their illusion of control. Terran High Command authorized it with one sentence: end them. Captain Ren didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for backup. He gathered what remained of the Terran fleets, battered, patched, angry, and began the burn toward the core. The Iron Rain, bruised from 100 battles, led the way. Behind it followed nearly 100 ships, warhawks, stealth bombers, retrofitted haulers stuffed with torpedoes, even old colony freighters repurposed into floating weapons of vengeance. And none of them flew a flag. Humanity had become something beyond nations now, beyond orders. They were an idea. You can hurt us, but we will never stop. The Empire wasn't idle. As the human fleet surged through contested space, the Imperial Armada massed. For all its fractures and failures, the Empire still had teeth. Thousands of ships, automated defense grids, capital-class dreadnoughts. They knew humanity was coming. They were terrified, but they were still ready to kill. And in orbit above Taraxis, they made their stand. The first strike came from an orbital cannon embedded in Taraxis' moon. A blast so powerful it tore through the hull of a Terran cruiser and split it in half like cracked bone. Debris rained across the front lines, lives gone in a blink. But the humans didn't stop. They accelerated. The Iron Rain returned fire with a railgun barrage that shattered the cannon's core. A chain reaction turned the moon's surface into an artificial sunrise. Spinebreakers broke formation and dove through the gaps in the enemy's phalanx. They weren't meant to survive, just to hurt. They rammed dreadnoughts, planted bombs, fired until their hulls were nothing but scrap and screaming steel. From the outer sectors, 3 rogue Earth-aligned factions arrived late, but not uninvited. Smugglers, outlaws, miners flying with cracked shields and barely functioning engines. They joined the charge with laughter and war songs playing across open frequencies. "This is for OSHA 3. This is for Falstead. This is for every child who couldn't crawl fast enough." And then came the final wave. The Wrathborn fleet. No announcements, no comms, just black ships streaking into the fray with engines burning red. They tore through the side of the enemy's formation with brute force, detonating power cores and rupturing hangars. No mercy, no questions, just blood for blood. Inside the Iron Rain, Captain Wren stood on the bridge, smoke rising from cracked consoles. Sparks flickered from blown circuits. The ship was bleeding. But so was the Empire. "Break the line," he ordered. Commander Lynn, her face streaked with soot, didn't argue. "Navigation systems are fried. We'll have to eyeball it." "Good," Wren growled. "Let them see us coming." The Iron Rain roared forward, its forward cannons glowing white-hot. Ahead, the flagship of the Imperial fleet, the Invictus, turned to face them. A ship 3 times their size, sleek, pristine, but not unbreakable. Not anymore. "Lock main battery," Wren ordered. "We're not stopping this time?" Lynn leaned forward. "For Earth?" Wren looked at her, and for the first time in years, he smiled. "For everything." The Iron Rain fired. A direct hit. The Invictus hull split with a deafening crack, metal shrieking in space as it vented oxygen and fire into the void. Its command deck collapsed inward. Seconds later, the Wrathborn fleet finished the job, ramming a destroyer into the Invictus's core. The explosion lit up the sky like a dying sun. The Empire's flagship was gone, and with it, their fearlessness. On the surface of Taraxis, chaos reigned. The skies burned, defense towers collapsed, propaganda hollow posters flickered and died. Civilians screamed as evacuation shuttles overloaded. The streets that once hosted parades now filled with ash and boot prints. A single message played on every screen, hacked in by Terran intelligence. "We warned you, you laughed. Now burn." Captain Wren led the first ground squad down to the surface. They didn't come to negotiate. There were no white flags. The time for words had died with Varnus IV, and every other colony turned to glass. But when they reached the Imperial Palace, all marble and gold and lies, they found something no one expected. It was empty. The Emperor was gone. The nobles had fled. The throne room, once the symbol of galactic dominance, stood silent. A child's toy sat on the marble steps. Burned, forgotten. Lynn stepped beside Wren. "They abandoned their people." Wren didn't answer. He just walked to the throne and stared. After a long pause, he turned to the rest of the squad. "Blow it." Minutes later, the palace crumbled into rubble. Across the galaxy, feeds lit up. The Empire's capital was gone. Not occupied. Destroyed. People who had lived their entire lives under Imperial control now stared at blank screens, waiting for orders that would never come. And in that vacuum, humanity stepped forward, not as conquerors, but as a warning. Days passed. The war, for all purposes, was over. Empire ships either surrendered or were torn apart by their own mutinous crews. Dozens of star systems declared neutrality, then quietly aligned with Earth out of survival, or admiration. But the victory wasn't clean. It wasn't heroic. On Earth, cities held moments of silence for the billions lost, human and otherwise. Memorials were built, not just for soldiers, but for civilians burned by orbital fire, for children lost to toxins, for entire worlds that would never grow again. Ren sat in a dark room, staring at old photos. His uniform lay folded in a corner. Medals he never asked for gathered dust in a drawer. He had won the war. But at what cost? In a summit of survivors, representatives from over a dozen former imperial systems gathered on a neutral station orbiting a dead moon. They met with Terran delegates, not to rebuild the empire, but to ensure no new one would ever rise. They created the Varelli's Accord, named for the blood-soaked world humanity had nearly turned into a graveyard. The name was a reminder that even in victory, humans must never forget who they had to become to survive. The new rules were brutal, clear: no centralized power, no throne worlds, no breeding vats, every planet free to govern itself, but bound to protect each other should tyranny rise again. Earth didn't lead, Earth watched, and the galaxy listened. Because they knew what happened when humanity stopped laughing. In orbit, aboard the repaired Iron Rain, Ren stood one last time on the bridge. Lin approached with a data pad. "Final command codes, sir. They're decommissioning the ship." He looked around. The bridge where it all started, where he gave the order to strike back, where his people bled and fought and burned and won. He took the pad, paused, then pressed confirm. The ship dimmed, the engines shut down, and the Iron Rain went silent, not as a weapon, but as a witness. Years later, children across the galaxy would grow up hearing the story, about the empire that ruled the stars, about the warning they gave, and the humans who laughed, and what came after the laughter, the fire, the vengeance, the scream. Some feared the tale, others admired it, but everyone remembered it. Because in the end, it wasn't just about war. It was about a species that refused to kneel, a species that turned warnings into war cries, and even when the stars themselves darkened, humanity never blinked.